Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Max Danielsen Show. I'm your host, Max Danielsen, and if you saw on Twitter and on Instagram, we are doing the Max Danielsen Show just a little bit differently than before, and that is the fact that we are switching to a bi-weekly schedule, meaning that every 2 weeks there will be another episode of the Max Danielsen Show. That's simply to allocate for more time and more content to talk about. As I've noticed, these podcasts have gotten less and less to talk about, and more it's expanding upon a topic and just going into different horizons with that. Whereas the envisionment where we started this podcast was just to talk about the specific events, how they pertain to sports, and move on to the next one. So I felt like we kind of lost track of that, or more so I lost track of that when my guests were on the show. So we are going to be changing that up. And if you could tell already, I have not introduced the guest. There was a scheduled guest for this week that was going to be Austin Coe. We were going to do a little bit of a parody episode where he was going to star as a different guest, but it was still going to be Austin. And we were going to be talking about all the news this week. But as many of you have already heard, and I'd imagine that if you haven't heard of it, you've probably been living under a rock for the past few days, especially between the days of March 11th and March 12th, where the big coronavirus scare has been tearing through the sports world. Not only has it started back in China, back in December 2019, finally made its way to the United States, and now we're having an outbreak of coronavirus here in the United States, and it was only a matter of time before it got to the sports world, but now it's to the point where the coronavirus has basically taken over society, and not because of the severity of the illness, but more so the hysteria that follows it. And even though, in my personal opinion, I think there should be some hysteria towards it, the way that the media perceived it and the way that many people are reacting towards it is on the bit of the extreme sides, to the point where people are going to Costco and Sam's Club and buying toilet paper. It makes no sense to buy toilet paper. They're buying all the waters except Dasani. You look over in Italy, their economy is crumbling. Everyone's stocking up on pasta except penne, which is pretty funny to me. But I mean, the world has gone into this mass hysteria, and it'll be interesting to look back on it, in about 10, 20 years, when I'm talking to my kids about this, and just explain the fact that we just overreacted about this whole thing. Now, do I know it can get worse than it is? Of course, it has the ability to. It's a worldwide pandemic, to the point where it was called by the president that it was a national crisis, meaning that now there's going to be allocation for more government funding within the state and federal. I believe it was state and federal, if I'm not mistaken, but I could be wrong. I know definitely in the state, but not necessarily federal. Anyways, but we aren't a politics podcast, but may have to become that, considering the fact all the news that came up with the pro sports world. So we'll get into it. All of these events happen between March 11th and March 12th, so we'll start it off here. This all started because of one NBA player testing positive for the coronavirus, which was Rudy Gobert, and then he ended up giving that virus to Donovan Mitchell, and that mysteriously ended the Jazz and Thunder game, which a lot of people were very confused on why it ended. Many speculated it was because of the coronavirus, but many still were uncertain about it, and it ended up being the case. I know that there was a fan that I read just a while ago who got the coronavirus after receiving an autograph from a player. It's not known if that happened during the interaction or whatever it could be, but I mean, this stuff is very, very contagious. And because of that, the NBA suspended its season for at least 30 days, and they are going to keep on it and basically just reconsider it whenever the time comes, if they need to keep it suspended for the rest of the year or if they should reopen it. Along with that, in the NBA world, you also have the fact that Charles Barkley was not feeling well and sent in a test and is now quarantining himself because he believes he also has the virus. So there is a lot of people I know in the sports world, and just in general, I know Tom Hanks and his wife have the coronavirus. We'll get into a couple other people here and there who have it. But the big thing that really happened, what shocked everyone and which really started a domino effect, was that the NCAA canceled all conference tournaments and even canceled March Madness, which is insane, first of all, considering the fact that March Madness is such a worldwide big event, and the fact that they just canceled it without, consideration. And that's where the whole domino effect of hysteria within the sports world just started. And a lot of people, and I know I'm not the only one that says this, but a lot of people believe it's all an overreaction about this. And I get, that this is bigger than basketball or bigger than sports, but at the same time, if Rudy Gobert was not diagnosed at the time with corona and he didn't have it, we wouldn't be where we are right now. But along with that, we'll get into later. Actually, I'll talk about it right now. Right now, the NCAA has given back eligibility to the spring athletes. So, of course, seniors through freshmen with all levels of college. It first started with D1 and finally got down to D2 and D3, which is awesome for me because now I have 3 years left of collegiate baseball. And it really means a lot to these guys because a lot of them played their last games and they just felt robbed. Now, the problem is a lot of seniors might not come back after they graduate. And that's also going to take a toll on that. I know D1 and D2 with their scholarships, they're going to have to allocate something out there to work around it. But we'll just have to see how this all works out because it'll be very, very, very interesting to see how it all plays out. And especially the fact with now they're trying to get into winter sports, which I don't know if I would give it to everyone, but definitely the seniors I think should to get one more go at it. So we'll see how that works. Along with that, the MLB opening day is delayed at least 2 weeks at this point. It will probably be suspended even longer. I know today that they canceled spring training. They let the players go home, either stay in Arizona or Florida or go back to the cities where they play or even go back home. So that's good on their part to keep the major league players well and healthy. It's a good situation for them, or really a good idea, I guess you could say, for them. But it's what needed to be done. And then, of course, some other leagues that suspended their seasons, it definitely the NHL, which at first was thinking about just playing with no fans, they suspended their season. The MLS suspended their season, and one that shocked everyone was the XFL canceling their season. Thankfully, they aren't going to fold. They're going to stick around for next year, which is great. I personally went to go to a Dallas Renegades game a while back with my girlfriend, and I must say this: it is refreshing. It really is refreshing to see a different type of football versus NFL. It seems like the crowd's more into it. You can follow it more around versus where, it just seems like it's repetitive, where almost every single play is a flag nowadays in the NFL because there's so many rules, versus in the XFL, it's just whatever the hell you want to do. But I personally liked it. Now, going on to the Dallas Renegades, how I think they played terrible against the Houston Roughnecks. And the main culprit amongst that is Landry Jones. And if there is a reason to show why the XFL doesn't have the talent that it has, it's just the problem that they don't have the amount of talent that they can get because most of those guys are in the NFL. Perfect example is Landry Jones, a great college quarterback, and now in the XFL, he threw 3 interceptions in a game, 2 on 2 straight drives, where he's just trying to make something work, and he throws it away and ends up costing the game. And, there's a lot of problems with the Renegades. Offensively, they're not bad. It's just the QB position they're iffy on, and then defense they need to improve on dramatically. But we'll move on here about the XFL. Maybe another day, kind of whenever I have a guest on, we'll talk about it a little bit more. I know a lot of you don't like to hear me blabble on about stuff. But moving on to a lot more stuff about the coronavirus. Juventus players Daniel Rugani and Paulo Dybala tested positive as well, and that led to the Premier League being postponed till April 3rd. Along with that, Arsenal manager Mikel Arteta, my apologies, was also tested positive. So not only is it affecting North American sports, but it's also going into European sports. And knowing how big the Premier League and international soccer is around there, especially in Europe, it's going to be an interesting one because now I know in Italy they're canceling stuff, and I know it's big there too. So we'll just have to see how this all plays out. And frankly, I don't know how to react about this all because we don't know how bad it's going to get from here. I think it's something that needed to happen, but at the same time, there's a big overreaction about it. If Rudy Gobert was not diagnosed, we wouldn't be at this point right now. Simple as that. Eventually, would we have gotten to this point? Yes. Someone would have eventually got diagnosed with coronavirus, and eventually the dominoes would have fallen. And unfortunately, at this point, that's where we are. Going on to that, we already talked about the colleges canceling their spring sports and allowing for eligibility or relief of eligibility from this year. As well, for the PGA Tour, they canceled all the rest of theirs, especially the Masters, which is going to be interesting again. I know that's a humongous event, and it is just going to be weird with all these things coming up. And now, as we get towards the end of this, it becomes the question of, are they going to cancel the Olympics this summer? And if they do, what do we do? If I'm not mistaken, they are this summer. They're either in the winter or the summer. I feel like they're actually in the... Yeah, okay, it's the Summer Olympics. Yeah. It is in Tokyo. Okay, so it's in Tokyo, which will be interesting as well because that's kind of around the area where everything's going on. So we'll have to see how that plays out. I hope, of course, they don't, and I think we should be okay at that point where it's starting to die down. We see it already in China happening. But it's just going to be something, the sports world is just going to have to play by ear. Will they start up the rest of the seasons? We have no idea. We're just going to have to see how that all plays out. After this, some other big things. The ATP Men's Tennis Tour has been delayed for 6 weeks. NASCAR is now to race with no fans at all in the stadium, even though, honestly, whenever you're watching NASCAR, and this is nothing against NASCAR, it just does not seem like there's fans there. And that's simply the fact because you can't hear it. You really can't. You could see them on TV. You can, but at the same time, it's an interesting sport. But we'll save that conversation for a later day. Anyways, along with all the sports closing, now the fact that there's schools going to online. I know a lot of my friends have moved out of their dorms already, their apartments, and they've gone back home. Meanwhile, we get an extra week of spring break and don't have to go back till Monday. That's going to be another thing that'll be interesting if they decide to go to spring class or put the spring semester on a online remote campus. I don't know how I'm going to fare with that because I'm a person that likes to learn face-to-face, but, whatever needs to be done needs to be done. It's just the question of how am I going to fare with that? But now the really big question becomes what's next for the sports world as we know it. Right now for the coronavirus, I know in Canada I read that they've isolated the suspect, I should say, of what causes it, which is going to be, I believe it's SARS COVID-2. So basically they're working on a vaccine as fast as they can. But my predictions, I don't really see them coming up with a vaccine anytime soon. But the running joke on Twitter is that they canceled hockey, so Canadians got right to work real quick. But going back onto the sports world, it really becomes the question of, what do we do in this scenario? Because we haven't seen this before. The world has never seen this before. The sports world has never seen this before. And it's to the point where you don't know which way to look, because you can't look on something in the past and look and say, okay, this is how they dealt with it, so let's try to deal with it this way. We're in an age of society where everything, even though, there is a high survival rate with coronavirus, the same time the fear of society just stopping and halting is what drives society into hysteria. And that's the biggest problem at this point, and what drives the sports world into that is because if they didn't stop it, it was just going to get worse and worse and worse. So what could I see the sports world doing? I feel like in a month, maybe a month or two, we could see some sport. I feel like MLB will come back. I don't know if XFL will try to come back. I feel like they'll just be done for the year. NFL will start as scheduled. I don't have any doubt about that. NBA and NHL will be interesting, though, because of the fact that they will basically miss so much of the end of the season and then jump right into playoffs. And that's going to be an interesting one, because now you have guys, even though they're training, they haven't seen game action in a month or two at this point. And, the guys who are in the bubble teams, they have no shot to really give a fight to show why they deserve a playoff spot. So that'll be interesting how the NBA handles that. I know Adam Silver has had a lot to deal with on his plate. I know the China scenario, the death of Kobe and David Stern, the former NBA commissioner, now the coronavirus scare, the fact that he has to freaking suspend the NBA. But at the same time, I respect the hell out of Adam Silver, because he's doing a great job, in my opinion. And speaking of commissioners, one that hasn't been doing a great job is Rob Manfred. The fact that he suspended Major League Baseball before the Astros is something just that blows my mind. But again, it's going to be really interesting how it all plays out within the next few weeks, the next few months, maybe the next year, because it's really going to be something that we are living in history right now. This is a real life 30 for 30 that we are living in. So it's going to be something that I'm going to be paying attention to. I don't know, for next week's broadcast, not next week's, but the week after's broadcast, I have no clue what I'm going to be talking about at this point. Maybe we'll find something to do. I have no clue. Maybe we'll do a little special segment. Maybe the top players of my opinion, top 10 players in each league of all time, in my opinion. I have no clue. We'll just have to figure that out. I'm going to talk to some people, see what they think. But yeah, just it's going to be interesting over these next few weeks. So we're going to take a very quick commercial break. When we get back, we're going to be talking about the other news in the sports world, which is interesting considering the fact that usually I will break this down into categories, but just the fact of Corona just taking over the sports world, it only deserves to be in one topic. So, and the fact that there's still not much to talk about, even though there is a lot to talk about, there's still not much to just break it down into groups. So don't go anywhere. We will be right back. The Max Danielsen Show is proud to announce Gage's Granite as an official sponsor for the Saturday podcast. Gage's Granite is a family-run company operating nearby in the Dallas Metroplex. They offer custom granite, travertine, onyx, and marble countertops to homeowners and businesses since 2000. Give them a call today at 972-243-6097 or visit gagesgranite.com or on Facebook and Twitter. You can also stop by the main showroom located at 2427 Glenda Lane in Dallas. Gage's Granite, a proud sponsor of the Max Danielsen Show.
Hey guys, this is Jason with Lacrosse Monkey. Are you looking for a place to shop for your next athletic season? Monkey Sports is here to help. Whether you're looking for baseball, hockey, or lacrosse gear, if you can dream it, we've got it. We provide both the latest and best on the market equipment for your athlete. Stop by and visit us at 105 West Bethany Drive, right off of US 75 in Allen. Monkey Sports, a proud sponsor of the Max Danielsen Show.
And we are back here on the Max Danielsen Show. Where we left off, we were just talking about the whole coronavirus scare and the fact of its impact in the sports world. So we are going to go on to the other tidbits of news for the sports world. The first is with the Tennessee Titans releasing Cameron Wake. If you remember Cameron Wake, he was a beast for the Miami Dolphins and didn't really give the Titans much of a spark plug, especially the fact that they're trying to go and get someone different. I feel like they're going to get rid of Ryan Tannehill. They need to free up as much cap space as physically possible. And frankly, he just was not doing it for them. I'm just trying to look here and just see. Yeah, I mean, didn't even start a game last season for the Titans. They just needed to get rid of his contract, and that's something that just needed to happen for them. Going on to the next bit of news, the Green Bay Packers released Jimmy Graham. This was the person that the Packers were expected to release just because of the fact of old age and the fact of his contract. It's something the Packers need to do, and I know they need to look for a younger tight end and maybe some other threat receivers because, frankly, Aaron Rodgers does not have much help besides Devontae, even though Alan Lazard went off last year. And, of course, Ventus Scalding, he went off as well. But we'll have to see where this takes the Packers. Maybe they try to re-sign Blake Martinez with that money. Who knows? I feel like Blake Martinez, though, is going to walk and go somewhere else, which kind of saddens me, but at the same time, it just needs to be. Going on to a signing here, the Buffalo Bills signed Josh Norman. Now, last year for the Redskins, Josh Norman was a shell of his old self, but right now for the Bills, I feel like this could be a really, really great option for him, especially to team up with Micah Hyde. This could be interesting. If Josh Norman goes back to the way he once was, that Bills secondary could be pretty decent this upcoming season. Going on to the NBA before we go back quickly to the NFL, that is the Brooklyn Nets firing Kenny Atkinson. Eventually this was going to happen. Atkinson, if I'm not mistaken, just was not doing that well of a job for the Nets. I forget what the full reason is. He stayed there for 4 seasons, and although he was a highly respected coach, a lot of players just wanted him out. And, you know, when you have Kyrie and KD coming back next season, you need a change, especially the fact that you're now dealing with the new age of Nets basketball. You need someone new. So we'll have to see who really they go to for that. Going on to the Los Angeles Chargers, they re-signed Austin Eckler to a 4-year, $24.5 million deal. Eckler, I mean, very, very consistent for the Chargers last year. Is a major piece to their offense. Of course, still going to do that. And for any fantasy owner, definitely worth the pickup in my opinion. He got me a lot of good fantasy points when I needed them. Moving on to the MLB, Yoan Moncada of the Chicago White Sox and Christian Yelich of the Milwaukee Brewers both extended on deals. Moncada's deal was a 5-year, $70 million deal, and for the White Sox, this is a great deal for them. Moncada is extremely young and is shown to be one of the better young and upcoming prospects since he's entered the league. So that's going to be great for the White Sox as they try to build up a team and hopefully a dynasty. And for the Brewers, of course, when you look at a guy who should have won the MVP back-to-back years if he didn't get injured, this is something the Brewers needed to do. And, of course, last year, you know the consistency this guy has when he's in the lineup. He carried, as we could tell in the postseason, the Brewers to postseason contention and just frankly was a big piece to them, and it was a no doubt that they need to throw a lot of money at him. Moving on to the NHL, the Tampa Bay Lightning, I believe he's their center if I'm not mistaken, I believe it is, yes. Steven Stamkos is out 6 to 8 weeks due to a core muscle injury. Now with this whole thing about the coronavirus, they were going to make a really good push for the playoffs. And at this point, it's not looking like he's going to be able to get a ring this year. And this was one of their better chances. So hopefully has a good recovery and can finish out his career. And hopefully one day can win a Stanley Cup ring. Now, going on to another thing for the NHL, Micah Zibanejad scored 5 goals in a game versus the Washington Capitals. This is the 4th goal game, or the 4th 5-goal game this century, and he is right now 5th in the NHL scoring with 38 goals. For Micah last year, didn't really have the greatest year. Had a decent year, I should say. I mean, 21 goals, not too bad for the Florida Panthers, and then comes to the New York Rangers and absolutely is just balling out this year for them. He's a humongous piece for the Rangers, and whenever the NHL comes back into its season, if it does, he's going to really help the Rangers push for a postseason run there. We have now just the final tidbits of news here. Going back on to the NFL, the Titans released Delaney Walker. Overall, he's a great tight end, but the big problem for the Titans was just injuries with him. And he has been injury prone for the past couple of years, so it wasn't a surprise that eventually he was going to have to walk. For the Minnesota Vikings, they released cornerback Xavier Rhodes and as well defensive tackle Linval Joseph. And of course, both of these guys, it's really just to save money for them. Xavier Rhodes, if I'm not mistaken, he's not a bad cornerback at all, but he is a liability on the field. And then for Linval Joseph, it's just simply to save money. As they're just battling a lot of salary cap issues. And, of course, this is something that they need to do, especially if they're going to keep paying Kirk Cousins. Going on to the final bits of news here, I guess I'll also mention this before I keep going. Going back onto college basketball, a couple of things here, if I can find them real quickly. Excuse me. So TCU upset number 2 Baylor a couple weeks ago by the score of 75-72. That was a really big thing, especially the fact that Baylor was looking to be the really big threat in March Madness, and TCU took them out and kind of put them on a little of a downturn towards the March Madness and dropped a little bit in stock. And then finally for college basketball, Utah State knocked off San Diego State to win the Mountain West title game by the score of 59-56. Of course, San Diego State didn't really play many great opponents this year and were highly ranked, and the fact that they just got knocked off at the last bit of the season is just a definition of the fact that they just did not play, much, and they were going to get screwed when it came to March Madness. Going back onto the NFL to end off this episode, the Denver Broncos assigned their franchise tag to Justin Simmons. He was the 98th overall pick in 2016 and really was a top-tier starter for them this past season. And to many people was considered a Pro Bowl snub. It's going to be a big thing for them, especially the fact that he is a major piece to their secondary and that he is just going to continue to get better and better and better as his years go on. Going on to the San Diego Chargers, they assigned their franchise tag to Hunter Henry. Of course, after Antonio Gates retiring, they needed to secure their young tight end who's really emerged as a great tight end in the league. Although he's been battling injuries throughout his career, he's still extremely good for being only 25 years old. And, I had him on my fantasy team, and let me just tell you, he has done miracles for me. Last year, I got George Kittle on my fantasy team, and he went off, and then I got Hunter Henry on my fantasy team, and he had a pretty good year as well. And then finally, to wrap up the show for today, the Baltimore Ravens assigned their franchise tag to Matt Judon. He was a 2019 Pro Bowler this year, led the defense, recording 9.5 sacks this last season, and over the past 3 seasons, 24.5 sacks. A major part to their defensive core, and of course, the fact that having Lamar Jackson on your team really, really helps that. And knowing the fact that they have Lamar Jackson for a couple years, they need to put it on someone on their defensive front. And the Ravens did that. And honestly, it's a great selection for them to do that. And I know that he is going to continue to grow, as like I say, for the past 3. And that's exactly why they signed the franchise tag, because they see a lot of potential in these guys. And they're mainly always young guys who just show the amount of potential that they have on the field. I mean, Hunter Henry, number one, I've seen personally having him on my fantasy team. I mean, that's pretty much it there. A little bit of an awkward way to end the show today. But, of course, we're going to be back. Oh, Lord. If this is the 13th, that means 14 days. We will be back on March 27th. So thank you for watching this week's episode from myself, Max Danielsen. And as always, have a pleasant good morning, a good afternoon, or good evening to you, wherever or whenever you may be watching. Thanks, y'all, and we will see you next episode.